Oh my God.
Which one?
These are actually very interesting questions.
Yeah. What do you think developed that money mindset? Because I think it has to do with how you personally looked at money.
And then suddenly you're hearing hawks being investigated for is because there was a moment where a shortcut was presented and someone said, let's do it, no one will find out. And
so you leave this job and you get this 5 million and now you have to build. What was the blueprint? Was the blueprint what it is now, or it changed when you were building?
Hey, you are hitting the spots today. I have to say, your questions, like, you really make me think. I'm like, oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
So
today's guest is a powerhouse in African entrepreneurship. Tumi Phake is the visionary founder of Zenzele Group. From building over 20 high-performance fitness facilities across South Africa to launching a multi-brand business portfolio in health, wellness, lifestyle, and tech, Tumi has mastered the art of building scalable, purpose-driven businesses. A former banker turned award-winning entrepreneur, he blends strategy with impact, proving that African businesses can lead with both excellence and heart. If you're building anything from a side hustle to a legacy brand, this is a conversation you need to hear. Hello, Resonate community, and welcome to the best and the biggest sales and entrepreneurship podcast in the whole wide world. Today, the founder I have, he's a purpose-driven founder of a collective of companies at the intersection of health, wellness, and lifestyle. I have Tumi Phake, who's the founder of Zenzele Group. Welcome to the Resonate podcast.
thank you for having me.
I am very excited to chat to you because I think I've watched your journey over the years, and I have some interesting questions to ask you concerning your journey. Well, before we get started, we do a fire round of questions just to get to know you a little bit more better. Okay. Is that okay?
Is that a warm up?
Sort of, yeah. It's like, I mean, you're in fitness, so this is like your kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So my first question to you is, if your business journey was a workout, what would it be?
If my business journey was a workout, what would it be? It would be an amazing race workout.
Okay.
Because it comes with a lot of adventure, nature, cardiovascular, your heart rate is pumping, so you're feeling fit, but you're seeing beautiful nature.
Okay.
Climbing mountains, a bit of slippery slides there and there. It's hot, it's sunny, it's difficult. You are dehydrated, looking for water. In the evening, I'm sleeping. I don't know what to eat. Can't find food. I have to go hunting. Then we possibly hunt and find like a little bird, and we. And the next day we're moving, and then the next day you actually go and you find a big fish. So now you're catching a big fish, and the following day you're catching a bigger animal, and it keeps growing. And then one day there's nothing, and then again there's something else. So it's a very adventurous with a bit of health, fitness, and all of that. So that's what I would describe it as.
I definitely, I'd understand that from somebody who's built 20 gyms across the country.
Yeah, jeez.
That is a lot.
It's a lot.
That is, okay. That is a lot. Okay. The second one is, what's harder? Building a business from scratch or convincing people to actually show up at the gym in winter?
Oh my God.
Which one?
These are actually very interesting questions.
Yeah.
They're actually both difficult. Actually,
it's like, okay. People don't come to the gym in winter.
Yeah, they're actually both difficult. But building a business from scratch is not for the faint-hearted. So I would rather go with people coming to the gym in winter. And maybe I'll give them some virtual workouts.
Yes.
In the comfort of the own home in the heater. So that's probably a little bit easier.
Okay.
Yeah, but starting from scratch is actually, it takes a lot. It takes a lot of you. Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, even just thinking about your business model is insane. And I want to get into that later because I think it would be hard to replicate something like that.
Yeah. I mean, everything under the sun has been done before.
Yeah.
there's nothing new under the sun. But I suppose, there's red tapes, access to capital, and things that can sort of prevent people from accessing certain things. But I think a lot of people are capable of doing certain things, and it's just that being in the right place, a market that allows you to sort of start something up. And those things do count.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So for a lot of people that haven't followed your journey, it would be important to give them context that Zenzele Group, you've got several gyms, coffee shops, and apparel business that is spread across the country in some of the biggest institutions in the country as well. And part of that obviously comes with the accolades of being the businessman of the year and going to Harvard, and you were a banker previously.
I was.
And I want to know, what's a lesser known moment in your life or in your journey that has shaped you the most as a founder?
Sure. I think a lessened moment, there's been quite a lot, but the one that sort of really comes in a lot is that, you have to live your life with a purpose. And as difficult that could be to define, because the journey of anything that you start, whether it's entrepreneurship, it could be a career, it comes with different seasons. There's winter, summer, and when winter hits, it does hit. And when you are not particularly sure about the purpose, you would probably feel that it will be winter forever and that the next season will not come. And so purpose sort of gives you a direction and a roadmap, so that when you are in a winter season, you understand that, just like right now, I'm dressed warm, it's winter.
Yeah.
But a couple of months from now on, I'll be feeling hot.
Yeah.
And so, and so people that sometimes do things because of financial gain, it becomes very challenging when the financial gain is no longer there, because then they lose the purpose of why they're actually doing this in the first place. And because they are directly linked to how much money the business or the bank account can make. And so you are sort of determined by your wallet.
Yeah.
And how much you have in the bank account. And so when it's not there, and that was a very humbling experience for me, which I had to learn that no amount of bank accounts, whether it's big or not, should determine the person that I am, and my purpose should be the same. And so, when I got to that point, and obviously it's not a perfect, sort of, I'm still learning, but when I really started to understand that, is that nothing will ever change or shape me. Nothing can stop me but myself.
Whew. That is so affirming. So as I was driving to come film today, I've had this thought for a couple of days, and I think today I was just marinating on it. And I thought to myself, I was reflecting to a point in my life a couple of years ago where I was like, personal development is like so underrated. I just want to hustle. I just want to make money. I want to build a business. And then I'm realizing that I've crossed over, and you probably relate to this too, a season in life where there's a certain threshold you reach in terms of making money.
Yes.
That makes you realize that it's not actually about the money, and that the purpose and the why and all these hoo-ha things that people talk about are actually what building a business is.
Yes.
And when I thought about that today, I thought to myself, that is so interesting, because we chase for a certain amount, and then when you reach that amount, and you're just like, why do I still feel the same?
Or you still want to chase more.
Yes.
And then you're chasing again.
Yeah.
And you're forever chasing.
Yeah.
It's like you're never getting anywhere.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It just blew my mind. Absolutely. And what I actually wanted to ask you is, what was the blueprint for you when you left? I mean, you were a banker. That's a great job.
Yes, it was.
Right.
In fact, I just remember I just got a promotion a few months, and I told my mom, maybe let me stay a little longer, just to see that, check coming into my bank account. I actually remember telling my investment committee when, the funding was approved at the time, 5 million. And I was so scared, because I was like, okay, I have 5 million in my bank account, in the business bank account. And I'm aware of the risk of managing people's money. And for me, when the 5 million came in, I wasn't excited because I have 5 million, but I was like, I don't want to screw this up.
Yeah.
I don't want to, this is someone's investment, and I need to make sure that I look after the investment. So there's a point where I actually was like, maybe I actually want to continue working. And I just remember the fund manager saying to me that, look, if you're not ready, you can come back, later next year.
Yeah.
But I knew in that moment that I'll probably never have that opportunity again.
Yeah.
And so I took it, and 11 years later, I'm still here.
You built.
Yeah.
And I think there's something about entrepreneurship that we can risk with our own money, but when it's other people's money, there's like a bit of a weight attached to it. So you leave this job and you get this 5 million, and now you have to build. What was the blueprint? Was the blueprint what it is now, or it changed when you were building?
Absolutely, it'll always change, and even now it's changing. I think business is always evolving, and you have to be agile and evolve based on different market conditions that present themselves. COVID came. We also had to be agile and flexible and tap into different market. So, being an entrepreneur was something that I've always wanted to do. I think I had a preconceived idea of working in the finance space, watching those stockbroker movies in New York. And I thought that's how it looks like.
Like Wolf of Wall Street.
And someone walking out and there's a red Ferrari and etc. And then when I eventually got into corporate world, I was like, it's not really. And I think it works for other people.
Yeah.
But I just eventually, I realized I was like, this is not for me.
Yeah.
There's certain ways in the corporate that you have to navigate, to grow. And there were just things that just did not align with me.
Yeah.
And I just thought, okay, maybe this is not for me.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm in a space where I want to have my own creative space, strategy, grow and take the risk and grow something on my own.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but it'll probably be more fulfilling. So to answer that question, I actually have no regrets that I did what I did because I'm a lot happier and I'm a more fulfilled person. That one day I'll tell my kids, grandkids to say, hey, I did some stupid thing. I quit my job, proper job, to do this. But hey, I loved the adventure was great. And that's for me was a life with, very fulfilled because I took risks. A lot of the times we always want to play safe and that's what I did. So the blueprint for me was that, I wanted to create, there's a difference between small business and a startup. And I think for me, I was always about growing a high growth business, scaling, and ultimately selling.
Yeah.
So the idea was never to keep, everything to yourself, but to grow it to a, reasonable size that you can attract more investments to grow it, and diversify. And so, and I think that understanding I was in the corporate space, in terms of providing wellness in corporates, the convenience because, people coming to work. I understood that every business, their KPIs is obviously driven by the bottom line, profit, sales, but also keeping employees well is actually becoming something that is very important for organization to keep their workforce healthy. So there is an investment that goes into, these blue chip companies to say, what are we doing, from mental health, employee assistance programs and etc. And so getting to that space is because I was in that space and it worked. We scaled very quickly. I think within 3 years, we started growing and, like we have, and some of the clients even to this day, they're still my clients.
Nice.
So with, the banks in South Africa, insurance companies, mining companies, and providing these wellness services and employee health and productivity. So it became quite interesting. And I think I also had, a vision to one day to provide the services to the consumer, to the person who lives in a certain area. but I also needed to learn the business, understand it comes with a lot of risk, and it evolving. And so for me, it was never always about fitness. I think fitness was one of the businesses that I started, but the end goal was to always sort of invest in other things over time. And some businesses that I will build, I will sell, and not be part of anymore. And some are depending how God is planned for me to move, but I have no intention to keep everything to myself forever.
Yeah.
And I'll also invest in other entrepreneurs at some point. I want to also get into a space where I'm investing in other great high growing businesses that I see that are interesting and put money there too. So I'm an investor.
Yeah. I think a lot about your kind of business model. And from what you said, in 3 years, your business model grows exponentially. You don't build one gym, make enough profits, and then build another one, et cetera, et cetera. What kind of philosophies have you had to employ to manage a team of people? Because the stakes are high. You are entrusting somebody to potentially manage a gym from one of the clients you've had to pitch at, and you've been given this opportunity. Are there any specific philosophies or tactics or tools that you could have learned within the corporate sector or that you employ now as an entrepreneur to manage your teams better?
Yes, absolutely. There are. I think working at corporate really helped in terms of, the governance part of it.
Yeah.
The operational excellence, and having a operation process in terms of, everything has to sort of speak to each other. And it's not something that just really happened overnight. I think one of the things, as I said, is that the one thing I was good at was to identify talent, people that were more experienced than me, because I didn't get into the fitness business to learn fitness. I have no fitness qualification. I can't train people. I'm a business person who just happens to be in the fitness business. But I don't, it's like opening a restaurant does not necessarily mean I'm a chef or I can cook.
Got you.
You know what I mean?
You're the businessman behind
that. So the intention was to never, necessarily learn about that I have to train someone or have the qualification to train someone on exercise, but was to basically build an investment structure that would enable to get the right people that would execute those certain things. So from an operations point of view. So, and the team or the people I had at the time, and we incorporated 100 years of experience. And so when I went to clients, here's this guy with the banking experience, with no business experience, but I incorporated 100 years of experience because I had guys who had been in the industry for long.
Ooh.
So, I had my head of operations who has 20 years of experience in operation. And so as soon as we get a deal, we sign a contract, sometimes it's a tender with a blue chip client, then I would hand it over to him.
Yeah.
And then he would run it from recruiting, training, hiring, all of these things. And that would be taken care of by the operation part of the business. And so I certainly took care of the investment and the business development to get, business, et cetera, in it and do that. And so, because I think that I've always maintained and you don't want to work in the business, but you want to work on the business.
Yeah.
Especially if you are looking to scale. Because if you're working in the business all the time as a sort of, and obviously there's nothing wrong. I mean, being a small business, it's a 1-man, 5 people sort of structure, then that's okay. Because but for me, the strategy was to not always be in the business, but to work on the business as to how to grow it and have someone that can work in the business to make sure all the day-to-day stuff is taken care of.
Yeah.
And obviously, having a team, different departments, HR, finance, operations, etc., to sales, to look after all these different aspects. So that is what helped to scale at the time. And it wasn't a perfect, as much as I'm saying it, it had its challenges. And sometimes when the business is making a lot of money, you actually don't see problems. Yeah. So there was a time we didn't realize there was so much we needed to learn because our revenue was growing year on year, and we solved every problem by just paying for it. And that is a big issue with scale, because suddenly when cash becomes tight, then you realize, damn, we actually have a lot of problems. We actually haven't learned.
We should not have been paying for that.
Yes, so, and those are the experiences that I went through, where it's like, money was there and it's just like, oh, okay, just pay for it. If a client hasn't paid you in 3 months, it's like,
you're good.
Yeah, we're good. It's like, pay us whenever. It's fine,
Oh my God.
And to get to a point where at the end of the month, you're telling your finance team to say, all the clients need to pay us now, And so those become very humbling experience. And then you realize like, whoa, actually, there was actually a lot of things in the business that we actually hadn't done properly. Because even if you are making money, you still need to be militant with how you run the ship.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a lot, and it's been a journey, and I think the journey still continues. Yeah.
One of my mentors says that the laziest way to solve a problem is to throw money at it.
Mm-hmm.
It's because every time you see a problem, you just think, just pay for it. Just fix it.
Yeah.
And you said something that was so key. And I think to every founder's journey is identifying the right people and leveraging on their skill. Were there certain characteristics that helped you identify whether that person would be a right fit for the team in terms of building the business? And what were they? Like, what were you looking for?
They were. And this is also what unlocked the initial investment of 5 million, because when I presented my idea business to the investment committee into the venture capital that I was dealing with at the time, it was like, well, how are you going to do this, right? And so, if I'm in my sales deck, I have this person, former whatever, 20 years experience, has built X, Y, and this person. And it's just like, wow. And then you're the man in the middle to say, well, this is, these are all the people in the team. That's what sort of sold the dream. And so, because it was like, okay, well, there's an experienced team here. And so the blend is great. And at the time when I started, I didn't really look at the characteristic. I was just focused on the qualification,
like the skills that they had.
Their skills. I was still a bit wet under the ear at the time. Well, I was just like, well, if you have the experience, come on board, But now I'm different. It's not just the experience. It's about alignment, culture, the kind of person that I'm, that I'm trying to build, and who I am, and ethics and all of these things. So at times it was just, then it was just excitement. Let's just get on the ship and let's just go for a ride.
Yeah.
Let's make money and build a business. And 20 years, 30 years, come on board.
Let's go.
Yeah. Then after 3-5 years, you realize, then the relationship dynamics start creeping in, and you realize, okay, we may not necessarily be aligned. And this is the next phase of the business that it requires, and where it requires everybody to work together. But then you realize that you have all these masters in the team, but there's, obviously arrogance and just all kinds of things where, and that's why a lot of bands break up, I mean, that's why Beyonce left Destiny's Child. Because ultimately there wasn't alignment.
Yeah.
Or else Destiny's Child would have still been around today.
Yeah, absolutely. What character is that?
I'm sure you're thinking, what an example.
Yeah, I'm just like, actually, now I'm trying to figure out who was the problem in Destiny's Child. I'm curious to know, what characteristics do you now look for? I think and I like that you said when you were starting, and I think all of us we just want the person with the skill. Can the job be done? And then the more we grow, we realize, okay, the job can be done, but maybe there's, like what you said, there's a bit of there's arrogance there's this and this. And those are things I always wish, I don't know, do you wish that maybe you would have known those things in the beginning, or it served you to be so naive in the beginning that the skills was good enough to take you to point B?
Sure. It's actually a bit of both. Because I think sometimes I look back and I'm like, damn, was I that naive? And my personality, I always see the good in people generally. And so and sometimes, my mentor would say to me, stop taking people that have potential, or they look like they have potential. Take people that already have potential. And I'll take someone where I'm like, you look like you have potential. You look like you have something. And you realize you take that person in and that's not what they want.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it's like, why aren't you not being that potential that I thought you were?
Yeah.
And so I've also created those boundaries. And I think the personal development that you spoke about is that I invested lots on myself and personal development. From going to therapy, I've been going to therapy for the last 6 years.
Oh, wow.
Spiritual therapy, mentor. And I have been doing that literally every week for the last 6 years. So every week for the last 6 years, I have someone that I speak to virtually an hour and go through my personal life, everything. And that has been such a turning point in my life because, charity also begins at home, in terms of the person that you need to be to become a leader.
Yeah.
And it starts with your family, who you are, and learning about your shadows or weak spots that would define you, and to say, what kind of person are you? And because suddenly then you know the people that you want to align with when you can understand the kind of person that you are. And a lot of times we don't actually know the kind of person that you want to be or you are. And I mean, that even includes friendship.
Yeah.
Where there's some boundaries that I've actually had to say, some guys that I grew up with, went to varsity school. I'm actually like, we actually, I don't hate you, but we're just not aligned anymore.
Yeah.
And so I need to move differently. And so I've been very selfish with my space and time. And so the alignment is definitely on that, is, especially to scale, is that you need to have people that align in terms of values as well.
Yeah.
And not taking shortcuts. Because you'll have situations where shortcut will present themselves in a team. And that's why you're having these tender issues and people being arrested, where people that look like they were the success that we thought they were.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you're hearing hawks being investigated for is because there was a moment where a shortcut was presented and someone said, let's do it. No one will find out. And that's what we've made at this stage to define success. And a lot of young people looking from the outside think, well, that's how success looks like. And then you ask, why does it all start coming down when you're hearing there's hawks and people, assets are being attached because everything was fraudulently done, that it actually wasn't real, because the shortcuts is what will take all your hard work, years of hard work. And in a moment, it'll be taken away.
Yeah.
And to say, actually, you are not the businessman that you presented yourself to be. Yeah. So those are the things that I had to, and I think for me, that alignment is important.
Yeah. And I think that's a big mindset shift that some lessons can only teach you.
Yeah.
That if somebody had to tell you, you'd be like, no, they've got the skill, they can do it. And I like how you tied it to your personal development and how that has shaped the leader that you actually are now. Because I think that is very profound. And I mean, I'm even noticing this with myself in our business, where the more growth the business takes, it's like it's demanding a higher version of me.
And well done. Like,
thank you.
I've just seen, just speaking of that, I've just seen how you've just propelled and pushed yourself.
Thank you.
Over the time. And I think you understand that it takes time.
Yeah.
And then there's a time where because there's times you're like, why is this thing not?
Yeah.
What's what's
going on here?
And then it's just hold on. And then eventually, so yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. So yeah, for me, that's been a big thing. And the other question I want to ask you is, every time we think of like, managing people, running a business and the finances. I mean, you said the first money you got was like 5 million. You were a banker. So I think you had an understanding of finances.
Yes. Drove the same car.
Yes.
Had the same salary for like 3 years.
Really?
Until one of my siblings was like, bro, why don't you buy a new car? I was like,
you didn't give yourself the raise that they gave you.
He was like, just get a new car. I was like, no, I'm good, And I think that's just how I operated then, because I didn't feel like that's my money and let me go blow it and spend it or whatever. So
what do you think developed that money mindset? Because I think it has to do with how you personally looked at money.
Hey, you are hitting the spots today. I have to say, your questions, like, you really make me think. I'm like, oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
So, there's a number of things. I think the first one is my grandparents. I was raised by my grandparents, and my grandparents were entrepreneurs. There were people that had no formal education in Tembisa. And during the apartheid time, they were actually successful. And these are people who had, they didn't even get into high school. But my grandfather ran like some scalable businesses, at the time. The stories I hear with my grandfather, apparently he would go to Mercedes. This is during apartheid in the 80s. And he would go to Mercedes with a bag cash to buy a Mercedes, 20K cash. Obviously at the time, that's what it was worth. And apparently, he was very militant with money. And my grandmother was not. My grandmother was more of the spender, and my grandfather
as every woman
was
be.
very militant. His shoes looked like they were about to tear off, and the guy had a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I was very interested on that, and so I think there was a bit of that, and I saw, I went to school because of them. They took care of lots of people in the household because of them, and they were able to grow something bootstrap, no funding, nothing. And I thought to myself, if those guys in those conditions, they were able to do that, imagine if they were in a market that allowed them they had access to growth.
Yeah.
I would bet that my grandfather would have probably been, a multi-millionaire, billionaire, but because he had the characteristic, just that he was not in the right place. He was in the township where everything was obviously designed not to allow you to grow.
Yeah.
But he's the same man that had all the characteristics and any other successful, white entrepreneur at his time, that he would have been just as capable. So that was that. And number two, I think I also made some mistakes, in my, when I graduated, that back in the days when you graduate, you have these banks and they'll call you, you qualify for this and that, graduate check account with the credit card. And I just took everything,
Oh my gosh.
Swipe, bought just stupid things. And it just got me into bad financial because, and I think after that I was like, let me, I don't want to just buy things because, and on credit. And so there was a little bit of both of that. And then obviously working in where my industry, where I was, because we're obviously funding, high net worth people, whether in their personal capacity or businesses. And I just I met a lot of wealthy people. And when I say wealthy, I've met some seriously wealthy people, but when they walked across the room, you could not tell at all.
Sure.
You wouldn't tell. Like, they look like an ordinary person. And then you sit and they pull their balance sheet and their assets, and you'd go back to the office and say, guys, this is, and I've had meetings with people who would come and they'll look super flashy, wearing designer clothes from top to bottom. But then you look at their finances and it doesn't translate. And that always stuck with me because I was like, this is so interesting. You get the guy showing up in the Porsche, he's driving this and whatever, but you look at he's actually not wealthy at all.
Yeah.
He's living on credit. Then you get a guy who's wearing slops, he's driving his bakkie, and he's worth 200, 300 million net worth, just like that.
Sure.
But very simple person. So that also taught me to say, what you always see out there, and I also say it respectively, is that, I think a lot of people, really wealthy, financially smart people, understand money, and they don't feel the need to flash it and show it, because they understand how money works. And money, you need to respect it and be smart about it. And if it works for you, you understand. And sometimes, and respectively, maybe with black people, we grow up, we were very poor. And so when we do make it, there's a need that we have to show that, hey, look at the car, my 4-6 pipe, 8 pipe, and look at my Gucci thing. And that could also really mess up your mindset, because now you always have a need to spend more, and you become more of a consumer than a builder.
Yeah.
So it was all these things from experience, and I'm not saying I got it all right, but I think some of it did help to say I want to do things differently.
Yeah.
And it contributed a lot. I mean, I wouldn't be in business for 11 years, especially having gone through COVID, which is something we'll chat about later. COVID was also something that came, and it was like, what is this, and that period was very difficult to navigate, because it was all the work that you've done in COVID. I mean, in our business, we couldn't trade.
That, but before I even get into COVID, when you're speaking about the money thing, I'm reminded I have a very well-known friend who's in business, and who was in the sneaker brand. And I remember having a conversation with him one time. And one of the things he said is like, Michelle, I think when things were really popping for him, he went and I think he bought a Bentley. He bought everything that when you are young, you dream about.
Sometimes you have to go through it.
Exactly.
Sometimes it's actually not a bad thing. But then eventually say, actually, nah. So sometimes it's actually not a bad thing.
100%. So he says to me, Michelle, I think I did that just to say I've done it. Yeah. And he was at a point, I was like, now, even if you give me a bucky, that's all I want. I don't want, but there's some satisfaction of having, I've driven a Bentley, I've owned this, and this is what I've driven and gone through that. And I mean, of course, it comes with very hard lessons in the process, unfortunately. But to that point, it's like sometimes it's like that inner child that if they're not healed, they will express themselves.
It is the inner child.
With everything you have.
It's the inner child. And operating from a mentality of survival mentality, And I think as Black people, there's a lot of learning and lessons that we need as a nation.
Yeah.
Because we have suffered. We were discriminated and in participating in the social economic landscape.
Yeah.
And so suddenly now we are introduced into these spaces. And so when you do recognize and realize that's when you're like, hey, I actually need to make my money work for me differently.
Yeah.
You're not going to be young forever. There's a point you want to be playing golf and letting money just work for you and all that. So it is a lesson. And a lot of the times people that make those big mistakes, when they come back, they blow up big.
Because
they blow up really
it's almost like
big.
they have to go through that process.
They blow up big time.
I just remembered that and I just remembered, I think all of us have that inner child that is there something specific in your life that you feel like my inner child is thriving here?
Oh my God. Yeah. It suddenly, I think also the car thing also just got to me all of a sudden. And I just also started buying cars that, and I was changing cars. I think I remember one of my employees.
Yeah.
He said, I'm changing cars like I'm changing my underwear.
Was that frequent?
No, I mean, it wasn't, but okay. I guess he saw it. And I remember trying to justify it, saying, but man, I've worked hard. Like, for a long time, I didn't do anything. And now I just want to celebrate a little bit. But now I think back, I was like, I actually could have bought another property somewhere else that would have yielded, enough cash flow for me to buy a car, and now this car is not in debt, and so those are the things that I was like, it wasn't necessary, and the cost of capital is just crazy.
Yeah.
And so I am the guy who would actually be okay being in a bucky now. And maybe my wife and my kids, they can drive a nicer car, an expensive car. But for me, you'll just see me like I'm cool. Right now I don't need to prove myself.
Because you've tasted.
Because I've tasted that, yes. And,
Okay, I want to get into 2020 because, so I had started a beauty salon on the 1st of February in 2020.
Ooh. The 1st?
Yes, of February. Launched, opened,
oh my God.
Invested, everything hired.
Oh my God. I honestly think that 2020, the beginning. Like people have to write a book or a story.
Yes.
So many good things look like they were about to start.
I thought, no, cash it. I was like, no, lang popile.
Hey, I'm telling you.
I was like, this, I'm set. And I was like, in a few months, I'll do another one. You know, I already had this plan in my head. The 1st of Feb. And then lockdown happened on the 23rd.
Yeah, exactly. Because I also remember there was another installation we did ourselves and we were about to open and we couldn't open.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Yeah.
Jeez, I'm sorry.
I didn't even last a month.
Sure.
After just all of that. And obviously because, for instance, if you look like at a gym, it's not what they called, is it an essential service? They had a term for it.
Yes.
An essential service, so they would only open like stores, and also there was like a lot of regulations
Pubs
at the time.
Were essential services. People were opening left, right, and center. That's a business I should have got in
literally,
during COVID.
Yeah.
Like an underground nightclub.
Yeah, those were, I heard so many stories.
There were guys who made a lot of money.
That is insane. Risking people's lives. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, first of all, because so reflecting on my journey, right? When the lockdown happened, I was so hopeful. I was like, I think it was 14 days or so in the beginning. I was like, 14 days, this thing's going to clear and we're going to be fine. I took the 14 days to rest, create content and, just figure myself out. And then it just got longer.
Spring clean my house.
Yes. And then it just became longer than expected. But now it's like there's stuff involved. Salaries need to be paid. Rents. It's like now the reality sunk in a little too slow. For me personally. It's like, and then you realize that, okay, what do I actually do here? And the weight of the responsibility of this thing you've built it's like, it just felt like I was dreaming at some point. Like I'd wake up and they'd be like, psych, we're back to normal. What was that like for you and how did you navigate that season? Because, I mean, how many gyms did you have in 2020?
So in 2020, we were on 2022.
Sure.
We had just signed a contract. Obviously, I won't disclose, with a to open 15. So we would have basically be 35 plus.
Ooh.
So we won the tender. Everything was signed.
Yeah.
And we were actually in the process of like getting everything together because everything was signed and sealed. And there were also other contracts that I had won at that period. And I said to you that there was also another installation.
Yes.
So we had spent about 2 million on installing this equipment, and we had installed it. And that week that we were supposed to open, then COVID happened. Yeah, I think for me I was in denial for quite a bit.
I think everyone
maybe
was.
a good 2 years. And yeah, I was. And I think it was my first experience of retrenchment. I was always driven by job creation and creating jobs. And so it personally hit me like hard because, one of our branches in Limpopo, we had to retrench people. And there was probably 10. And we tried, this was not in the beginning of COVID. It was probably like towards the end of the year, maybe. Because we actually paid. The great thing is during COVID, all my staff who worked, they were paid full salaries by the grace of God, because some of our clients really supported us at that time. So there were also very great clients that were just came on board, and I have to say, and I'd mention it, like Discovery, Adrian Gore, I've met that man once, but I mean, the philosophy of Discovery and what Adrian Gore is doing and what they did as a black business is something that will forever, because they really supported us. And when I say support, I'm not like 20% support. It's like 100% support. We will support you until this pandemic is done.
Ooh.
And that was like 2 years. So it's something that if I do meet him one day, it probably for him wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
But I'll actually say, hey, by the way, like this is what it actually changed people's lives. People didn't lose jobs and stuff. So those were some of the, things that happened, but it was very hard. We had to retrench people and also people couldn't find work because you're losing your job during the pandemic.
Yes.
You can't go and look for work because it's like, well, there aren't any jobs because everything else is. And so that was the first phase of retrenchments and this and that and jeepers.
Was a lot. Did it what worlds did it open up in terms of the different industries that you're a part of? Like, for instance, I am well aware that in your gyms you play, like, there's screens and you actually show workouts for people to work out in. But with COVID happening and the rise of people working from home and people not wanting to go out anymore and people potentially setting up their own gyms, did that open up maybe a department or something within the way that you do business that enables you to now adapt and also cater to the lifestyle change that will occur from the pandemic?
Yeah, great question. There's one innovative product that we actually launched during COVID. It was called the Akaya Gym. It was like a home gym product, and it did so well.
Okay.
But we ran out of stock, and we couldn't get more stock because there was lockdown, and so that was one of those. And one of the things, the business that I launched was Zenzele Technology, where we started investing in tech, and the first thing that we invested in is to saying let's invest in wellness technology. So also made a few mistakes, lost a lot of money before getting to a place. I think there's about like 1.2 million of an app development that we were trying to do, and then we realized this is just burn that money and
make peace.
Because at the time we were then positioning ourselves to provide our service digitally, but we wanted to obviously create a platform, and so we invested in an app during the pandemic, and ultimately it launched. So, and we're providing that service to our corporate clients. So now it's become part of the proposition and service, to saying that even when you're at home, you have the digital technology and the application that's available. So that's how that basically emerged at the time, and other things. So yeah, and I mean, even us now, as you know, we're opening at Lion Pride. Diversifying into the sort of retail space was also part of diversifying our business, because even employees now, I mean, they don't necessarily work from home. I mean, work in the office Monday to Friday. The hybrid model has been introduced, where people are at the office and they're at home. And so us being able to have a captive audience where when they're at home, they are service, and when they're in the office, they are still service, is what presented itself. And it's been a blessing in disguise, because the opportunities that have availed themselves now, I think that, one had to sort of go through the hard knocks, because I think, with great things come great responsibility. And I'm glad, at the time, obviously, as I said, it wasn't really great. At times I just thought, jeepers, everything that I worked for. Now this pandemic, who actually, where does this pandemic come from? And we navigated and we survived. And, we obviously, like I said, making an example of some of our clients, Discovery and other clients that really supported us, and we were able to sustain our business and then come out of the pandemic and then get ourselves going. Yeah.
Sure. It's a very interesting, the pandemic was an interesting time, but I love what you say, that it actually opened up new things for you. And also it goes back to personal development, because how are you okay with just losing so much? And also almost feel like we lost time. We lost money, potentially for some people, relationships. There's a lot of things that happened.
I had a baby then, so
I know you were good.
I had time to build,
Yeah, that actually leads on to my second last question that I want to ask you. I am a firm believer, and I think necessarily because of my upbringing and my faith, I'm a firm believer of family. And I like what you said in the beginning, that the key fundamentals is how are you running your home, and that influences essentially how we show up as a leader to the world. And I rave about this all the time, that my husband's at the backbone of literally everything that I do. He will leave an important meeting and come and stand behind the camera if I need to shoot content somewhere,
Yeah.
And I'm curious to know what being a husband and a father has done to your entrepreneurial journey as a founder and as a leader. And did it change something? And if it did, what aspects of your life have you seen be potentially made better and grow?
Sure. honestly, I think one of the greatest things I achieved in the last 5 years is being a husband and a father.
Come on.
That was my biggest achievement. Just the support that my wife has been, during this period of transitioning, and she's always like, damn, is entrepreneur, like, she's just like, this is not, so and just being a father, has really been such a blessing. And I really think, I don't know, maybe, I'm not sure if they weren't around how, things would have turned out. So I think that them being around, really just, I showed up every day, and I've been showing up to this day, because if I don't feel like getting up, well, at least I have a reason to get up. And so that kept me going. And I think, speaking about values, and charity begins at home. And so your values and how you operate your family, and what the growth for your family translates to how you run your business.
Absolutely.
And so even some people that I do business with, I look at that myself to say, how are you as a man, as a father to your kids, and sometimes you'll find that the way they operate is essentially how they'll operate even in their business life. And I say that without judgment, but more from a conscious place to saying, I think I can see that the saying that charity begins at home is not said in vain, but charity certainly begins at home. And so, what you do in your private, quiet time is a reflection of what happens everywhere else. Even if you are not aware of it, but it actually translates to that. So, and that's the growth and development that I'd had to make for myself, which has been incredible. So yeah, I had a big win with my family in the last 5 years, and I think that was probably one of my biggest achievements, I would say, I did in the last 5 years.
That's beautiful. Awesome. That's really, really beautiful. My last question to you is, if the 2024 version of you, just leaving banking, if they could see the empire you've built now, what do you think he'd say?
Wow. Oh, wow. I just said, like, oh, wow, actually.
Like his last day at work.
Wow.
And he was leaving to build this business with the idea, but not fully knowing what it's going to turn out. A bit nervous, unsure with whatever could have been happening in his life at the time. What do you think?
Yeah, I would actually said you should have started sooner.
Wow.
Yeah, I think I should have started sooner. And I would have said, do you see some of the things that you were afraid of? Like, they actually nothing. They weren't as big and scary as you thought they were. And go for it. So I actually would have actually started way, way sooner. And I've seen some of my entrepreneur colleagues or friends and people some of them never worked in the formal space. In their early days, they went through all the losing money and everything. But now they're just such a refined business people, because it's like there's nothing that I haven't learned under the sun. So yeah, but I would say wife, and I should have started earlier.
Yeah. I think you'd also be very proud.
Very proud
of how far you've come.
Very, very
and
proud.
How resilient you've been over the years.
Very proud.
He'd be like clapping hands and just having a moment.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Tumi Phake, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
This has been absolutely amazing. Your journey is not only inspiring, but it's affirming.
Yeah.
And that's always so beautiful to watch. We cannot wait to see what you're about to do in the next coming years, because I am seeing you're moving from the B2B model, but also expanding into the B2C model as well. So that's going to be very exciting to watch and also experience as a consumer as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's quite important.
Yeah. So that's going to be nice. Thank you so much
for
joining us. Resonate community, I hope that you learned so many nuggets from this podcast episode. I think Tumi's story is one of those stories that I look and I think about and think to myself, we all have what it takes within us to build the very thing that we believe we've been called to build. And I hope that you received that from not only the story, but the lessons that were shared today. We love you guys so much, and we hope that you enjoyed this podcast episode. We'll see you guys on our next podcast episode. Goodbye.